Hi there, chess lovers, and welcome back to Chessway. In today's video, we're going to look at a very interesting game played between Alexander Alekhine and Dmitry Saviori. This battle took place in March 1931. All right, let's get started. The game begins with e4, e5, then knight to f3, and pawn to d6. As usual, white challenges the center with d4, and black immediately captures the pawn. Okay, after the pawn is recaptured with the knight, the game continues normally with knight to d7. Then, the bishop develops to c4, and after g6, Alekhine castles short. After that, black develops the bishop to g7, and white continues developing with knight to c3. Then, of course, knight to f6 follows. But Alekhine pins the knight right away with bishop to g5. So far, everything still looks normal, right? Typical responses like h6, short castling, or c6 are all possible. They often lead to attacking chances for the queen later. But Saviori decides to play knight to e5, attacking the bishop. Honestly, I don't really like this early move. It feels premature. But let's see what happens. The bishop retreats to b3. Now, here's my question. Who can stop white from pushing f4? Remember, the knight is still pinned by the bishop. Maybe h6 could be played first, but once black castles short, that knight might easily become exposed. So be careful. That knight may look strong in the center, but the light-squared bishop is lurking, ready to pressure the king later. Okay, Saviori castles short. And as expected, Alekhine pushes f4, attacking the knight. The knight has to move again, right? But it looks like black had this all planned. Instead of retreating the knight, he plays bishop to g4, attacking the queen. The best response is queen to e1, because once again, if the knight moves, that pawn will advance and crush the position. But Alekhine, being Alekhine, doesn't care about material. He sacrifices the queen by capturing the knight. Though technically it's more of an exchange, because black has no real choice. If the bishop doesn't take the queen, the pawn will still capture the knight. So after black accepts the sacrifice, white's pawn captures again, taking the knight back. Now, here's an interesting moment. If you were black, which bishop would you save? Maybe saving the light-squared bishop makes more sense, because if the pawn captures it, the queen can recapture. But let's analyze that to be sure. If black moves the light bishop to g4, the pawn captures it, and that's a double attack, forcing the queen to recapture. Then white's pawn captures the rook with check, and of course takes back. Now the queen faces two knights and a rook. White might be slightly better, but it's not an easy game. Black's structure isn't totally ruined. All right, let's go back to the main line.
Here, Saviori decides to save the dark-squared bishop by moving it to h8. It actually makes sense. If earlier the queen was up against two knights and a rook, now it's only against two knights and one bishop. Materially, that's an improvement. But the pawn on f6 is becoming dangerous. To keep the attack going, Alekhine doesn't take the bishop. Instead, he sacrifices another piece, a knight on e6. This move looks strange, but as I said earlier, the whole purpose is to exploit the powerful pawn on f6. Since it's a fork, Saviori takes the knight. After that, white's bishop recaptures with check. The king can't move, so the rook has to block. Now, gets captured by the other rook. Materially, this looks worse for white. The queen is now facing just a bishop and a knight. But look deeper. There's a looming threat of bishop to h6 followed by knight to d5 and knight to e7 check, which could be deadly. So, black plays c6 first, defending the d5 square and opening the queen's attack. But this makes the d6 pawn very weak, so white pushes e5. Now, things are getting dangerous. That pawn is pinned to the rook. If black ignores it, white can pull back the bishop and combine it with a pawn push to e7, and that could end the game fast. So black tries queen to b6, giving check. After the king slides to h1, the queen moves to c5, pinning the pawn back to the bishop. And if the rook captures the pawn, the queen can take back, a double attack. But Alekhine doesn't care. The rook still takes the pawn. What a brutal attack! After the queen takes with a double attack, white's bishop captures the rook with check. The king has no choice but to take back. Then comes rook to d7 check. Now, the king has 4 possible squares, but if he moves to the e-file, rook to e7 will be checkmate, and white will end up a knight ahead in the endgame. King to f8 looks logical, but once again, bishop to h6 check follows. If the king goes to e8, it's checkmate with rook to e7. If he goes to g8, it's checkmate by the pawn. Here, the king chooses g8, but then comes f7 check. After the king moves to f8, that advanced pawn actually allows the queen to protect the bishop and cover g7. It looks simple, but it's not that easy. If bishop to e7 check, that's a blunder. After queen takes, rook takes, and king takes, the result is a draw, bishop versus knight. And as I said earlier, if bishop to h6, black can block with his bishop, because now the queen also defends g7. But of course, a grandmaster never runs out of ideas. Another sacrifice, knight to e4. Wow! Not only a sacrifice, but that knight also protects the bishop. Let's look quickly. If the queen captures the knight, then bishop to h6 check follows. The bishop must block. Now, with no help from the queen, white's bishop captures the blocking bishop with check, forcing the king to take back. And then, pawn promotes to a queen, double checkmate. A beautiful trap. All right, let's get back to the real game. Here, the queen has to stay on the diagonal so she captures the pawn instead. Yes, bishop to e7 is still playable, and it's good, but Alekhine has already seen the pattern. He plays bishop to h6 check anyway. After the bishop blocks, instead of taking it, Alekhine sacrifices again, knight to g5. At this point, black is completely finished. There's no way to stop checkmate. If black tries to cover e6 with the queen or rook, then knight takes h7 is checkmate. Such an amazing idea. Savory does capture the bishop, and yes, knight to e6, checkmate. What a masterpiece. White's strategy here was absolutely brilliant. He didn't care about material at all. First, the queen fought against 2 knights and a rook, then against 2 knights and a bishop, then only a knight and a bishop, and in the end, only a rook remained. Every sacrifice was aimed at one thing, to unleash the power of the f6 pawn. And look at it now. That same pawn helped deliver the final checkmate. Incredible, right? All right, friends, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from it. Thank you for watching. See you next time, and as always, stay sharp, chess lovers.